I'm just happy with who I am, like I'm me, it's fine. So don't worry about missing a shot, losing a game or whatnot. Just go out there and no matter what, you're fine. So go out and play with confidence.
Hi everyone, it's Joe. You're listening to Occupational Hazards, a series of candid conversations with some of the most inspiring people I know as they share their path to finding their calling and all the gritty realities of their jobs. Whether you want to demystify your dream job or are someone like me who enjoys getting a peek into other people's work lives, then this is the podcast for you. Our next guest is a professional athlete whose life lessons, both on and off the court, will resonate not just with the sports lovers, but with anyone looking to overcome adversity and outdo their personal best. Sean Anthony is a professional basketball player and team captain of Northport Batang Pier, a team in the Philippine Basketball Association. The PBA was the first professional basketball league in Asia and remains the second oldest continuous professional basketball league in the entire world, after the NBA. A native of Canada with Filipino roots on his mother's side, Sean played varsity basketball at McGill University in Montreal on a scholarship before entering the PBA. While in McGill, he majored in physical education and kinesiology. Fun fact, the inventor of the game of basketball, James Naismith, was also a native of Canada who studied and then taught physical education at McGill University before he moved to the US to become a physician. Anyway, in the PBA, Sean played for the Powerade Tigers, Barako Bull Energy Cola, the Talk and Text Dropang Texters, Air 21 Express, the Meralco Bolts, and the NLEX Road Warriors, before making his way to Northport Batang Pier. Earlier in his career, he was honored as part of the PBA All-Rookie Team, an award given to the top rookies of the season in each of the 5 basketball positions. Also in his rookie year, he was named co-MVP of the PBA All-Star Weekend's Rookies vs. Sophomore Blitz game. Career highlights include being named the PBA Defensive Player of the Year by the PBA Press Corps in 2019 and being part of the PBA Mythical First Team, an honor given annually to the best players in each of the 5 basketball positions: point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, that's Sean's position, and center. He was also honored as part of the PBA All-Defensive Team in 2019. In this conversation, Sean gives us a behind-the-scenes look at what it was really like playing in the PBA bubble in 2020. We recorded this episode in May 2021 as the Philippines was under another COVID-induced lockdown. It's now late June, and last we checked, the PBA was in talks to reopen its 46th season this July. While Sean is obviously very driven to win on the court, it's also obvious that it's his family that keeps him grounded throughout all the ups and downs of life. And now, without further ado, here's Sean to tell us all about athletics in the new normal. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to be here. We actually crowdsourced a few questions that we'll ask at the end, but there were a lot of audience questions, so I want to make sure we have time built in for that. Yeah.
More than happy.
Maybe you can tell us about where you are in your pandemic arc and what it was like to be a professional basketball player from the time the pandemic started up to now.
Wow, yeah. Well, as you know, basketball is probably one of the higher risk sports that you can play because you'll be literally face to face with your opponent. So obviously that was shut down for a while around the whole world. And then when ECQ, which in the Philippines basically means being stuck in your house, only being able to get essential goods, I think all the basketball players had to get very, very creative to find ways to stay in shape and whatnot. So that was basically the first thing I had to do was build out a home gym. We weren't even allowed to run and walk around the village, right? So essentially I just had to build a home gym, stay in shape, get ready, Then we had the bubble, which we can get into a little more detail. And then after that, we've had this little break, and we've just kind of been waiting for things to clear up and get back to GCQ. And then we just got new rules for how we're going to start the season, which we can talk about as well. So it's just been a challenge, like an up and down battle, a lot of limbo, not really having dates for first games, and then getting pushed back. So as an athlete, it was kind of hard to target and build up to something, to periodize where you're going. So yeah, just being able to adapt like everyone else, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned bubble. Maybe we could talk about that because I think different countries around the world have tried to bubble their sports. The Olympics is one that I think the whole world is watching, like how they're going to execute that, if that's still happening. And maybe you can tell us about your experience with the first bubble and then what you think of the upcoming bubble or what you know about the upcoming bubble.
The bubble before, it was a while ago. It was almost 6 months or more. So we still didn't know as much about the virus a little bit. And so we were all really nervous to go into a hotel, but everything worked out well. And we were glad that they put in all the safety protocols. So basically, all the players, coaches, team staff, media, PBA staff, referees, anybody that was basically involved with the PBA all stayed in a massive convention center hotel called Quest Hotel. And we were there for about anywhere from 2 months to 3.5 or 4 months even. And basically we were only allowed to stay inside the hotel, and then buses would take us from the hotel to the gym, and the gym was secured as well. So it was like a bubble hotel and then like a big mini bubble gym, and we would just go back and forth between the two. And it was super interesting because everybody was separated from their families for months at a time. You're in a room and everyone had a roommate. There was not a lot of activities we could do, right? We're just in a hotel. They set it up nicely that there was an outdoor area where we could kind of walk around and whatnot to get some fresh air. But other than that, it was a huge uptaking on the PBA, and, just to feed us all every day, to make sure the gym schedules for us to practice. There was 12 teams, so every day was scheduled. So one team would practice at 5 a.m, and then the next day you would be practicing at 7. They had this shifting schedule, so everyone would get different times on the court, and there was no favorite time slot. So you could be practicing at 10 o'clock one night, and then you would be bumped down to the bottom of the list for the next day. So you'd be waking up at 5 o'clock the next day for practice. So yeah, it was a lot of adjustments, and especially they tried to get it done quickly. So they packed the games. There was games every single day of the week. So we were playing 3 to 4 games. I think even one stretch we had 6 games in 9 days or something like that. So it was really hard on the body as well.
Yeah, how did you cope with that? Because I mean, I'm sure you guys were glad that you were able to play again because you mentioned that during lockdown it was very challenging to be, locked up and having to train and keep in peak performance condition. But like, how did you deal with being away from family and then the changing schedules? And I know that there were a few close calls also, at least what was being reported in the media, because I think everyone was kind of watching this experimental bubble unfold, and there were, stories of, I guess, leaks in the bubble where there were kind of potential outbreaks. Yeah, maybe can you talk about how you dealt with all of those challenges?
Yeah. So being away from our families was tough, definitely. Mentally being there. Physically, it was a challenge just to be always playing all the time. And then there was a couple false positives inside the bubble, but at the time we didn't know they were false positives, right? So everyone started freaking out a little bit because we're all in the same hotel, right? So we, in our minds, if a few people had it, would spread quickly, especially if we're playing and whatnot. But credit to the PBA and the doctors and whatnot, they did a great job, and the scheduling was basically down to the minute. So one team would be able to go to the weight room in the hotel, and then your time was up, and then there'd be a huge disinfecting time. We wouldn't even really match cross each other, and then the next team would come in. So they were really on top of all their protocols and on their safety stuff. There was no breaches, so like no one went out or no one from the outside came in, but it was just a few false positive. So they tested positive, then they got taken away and isolated in another facility where they got retested again with the RT-PCR test, and then they turned up negative, thankfully. But that's kind of how that 6 games in 9 days things happened, because when those false positives came up, the games got all pushed back and cramped together. So there was quadruple headers where there was 4 games in one day. It was obviously 8 teams, but they were backing them up. So we'd play one game in the morning on, let's say, Monday, and then on the Tuesday or Wednesday, we'd play another game, even back to back.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like something you're going to be telling your kids and grandkids for a while, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we
What?
had the easiest job. We had to just go out and play. The organizers, the staff, they were juggling all the schedules, all the, yeah, there's a lot of hard work, and we're all grateful to the PBA and the teams and whatnot for all they did to make it happen.
Yeah, it really does take a village, and often a lot of the work doesn't get seen. How will this upcoming bubble be different, you think?
Well, there's not going to be another bubble. We're going to be doing a closed circuit system. Moving forward, that's what the PBA is doing. So once it's GCQ, I guess, which is going to hopefully be this coming weekend or whatnot, right? The 15th is in a couple days. So hopefully Duterte will say it's GCQ, and then we'll be allowed to start practicing. What will happen is we've already been tested and we're just isolating at home now. And so all the players will be basically locked down in their houses. We can't even go for groceries. Everything will be delivered. Yeah, we're basically not allowed out of our house. So we're just allowed to get in our car to go to the gym for practice and then back home. And then that's what we'll be doing. We'll be just commuting. And then hopefully after a few weeks of practice, everything works out and we'll be able to play next month, hopefully. So yeah, we're just hoping it all works out.
Okay. And for the listeners who maybe are not familiar with the quarantine classification system in the Philippines, I'm just going to clarify that ECQ is Enhanced Community Quarantine. So as Sean mentioned, that was the strictest form of lockdown. And then we would like to move toward General Community Quarantine, which is slightly less restrictive. So there are more industries and activities that can open up to the public, including sports. So yeah, I hope that works out as well. It really depends on how we can manage the cases at the moment. Yeah, but I'm glad that there is a future, you know. I guess, how did that experience, having gone through everything you did in the past year, how did that shape the way you think about your profession and what you want to do moving forward?
It's actually been huge for me. I'm in the second half or the latter part of my career already. So when this all happened, it just kind of brought about how fragile or how short a basketball career is, right? So how to get prepared for life after basketball. So it just gave me a lot of time to really reflect on the direction I was going. So I was actually studying for my CFA. I had passed the first exam already and was getting ready for the second. But for those who don't know, the CFA is a chartered financial analyst. So basically like a equity analyst or a fund manager where I was going towards. But I found it was very specific, and I wanted to do something a little more broad that gave me a lot more opportunities coming out of basketball to kind of figure out more of what I wanted to do. So I'm actually starting my MBA online next month. So I will be doing an online MBA. And considering that we're going to be locked down in our house for the next couple months, I think it's a perfect time to do that.
That was actually one of the most frequent audience questions that came up, because we sent out a question to the listeners saying, you know, what would you want to ask a professional basketball player? And many people asked, what do you plan to do after retirement? I guess, yeah, it's great that well, congratulations on passing the first exam and then also pivoting and broadening your study of business to more than finance and, you know, an all-encompassing MBA. I guess, is that common? Or how many of your peers do you know that have actually gone back to school to do something like that? And then maybe what is the career path typically for a basketball player Yeah, is that super common to go back to school, take a master's degree in business?
Um, I haven't really seen anyone really do that out here that I know about, but I'm sure maybe some people have. I know a lot of players. For example, my good friend Chris Ross, who plays for San Miguel, he just finished his undergraduate. So he came out here to play basketball and hadn't finished his degree. So he used this pandemic to finish his school, which was huge. So big congratulations to him. In terms of secondary degrees, I think there's a couple players like Eric Menk that did a master's in, I think something to do with sports, sports psychology maybe, or so, I forgot. So there are players who do, and I think some of the players just fall back onto what their undergraduates were. So it all depends. I think other players got into business. So, for example, some of the guys that played for San Miguel, they ended up being growers of the Magnolia chickens or whatnot. So they'd grow farms for the chickens or the pork, or some started to do residential real estate. There's a lot of opportunities when you're a basketball player because you meet a wide network of people. So other players did logistics systems where they had trucking companies. Others set up, I think, retail centers for motorcycles and whatnot. So there's a wide array of stuff. So it's good to see that side of players being able to advance to life after basketball.
Yeah. Do some players choose to stay active in the league, whether as coaches or announcers? I think that's a more, at least for casual fans of the sport, that's the more visible career path where you'll see like a Charles Barkley now. I mean, I'm sure he does other things, but he's also most visible as a commentator.
Yeah, a lot of players in the States or even here, yeah, there's a lot of our coach, like my coach, Coach Bido, he played for Inebra for the longest time, right? And then our assistant coach, Coach Renzi, played for Alaska under
Yeah.
Coach Tim Cohn. So most of the coaches are actually ex-players. So they stick around the game. A lot of the announcers are ex-players as well. So they transition into that. And the same thing in the States. I think the NBA guys make significantly more money than we do, a lot more. So they're able to have financial advisors that help them invest and do other things as well. Like, for example, Shaq's an announcer, but he owns like 50 Five Guy Burgers outlets. He owns mini malls. He operates a lot of businesses as well. So there's lots of things.
And
Like,
raps and acts, right?
yeah, like he's actually huge into marketing too, right? You just see him with all these brands because he comes out and he's got that eccentricness to him. So he gets a lot of endorsements.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned financial management. I grew up around people who were very into basketball. So I would always hear about the behind the scenes stories of all these players, mostly in the NBA. The typical story is the player gets all these endorsements, maybe has people around him that don't have his best interests at heart or don't know how to manage money. So it's been a kind of a common story arc for a lot of players to like have it all, lose it all. So now the NBA over the past few years has actually, I think, instituted a mandatory training program where all the rookies will like learn from an athlete who lost it all so that they can avoid that path and actively start thinking about how they want to manage their finances. At the PBA level, is there something like that?
Yes, the new commissioner, Willie Marshall, has done a great job. So before the pandemic hit, actually, every year we would have, I think, yeah, so 2 years before the pandemic, the first one was about, it was a seminar all the players in the PBA had to attend, and it was about, there was topics on branding, like how to build a brand for yourself, social media. Then there was finance was a big one. So they had personal finance, good debt, bad debt, just basic stuff like that. And then our health. And then another one was on grit. They put out all these different seminars for us to help us. And one of the main things is finances, right? There's always sad stories of players who had great livings while they're playing basketball and then mismanaged their money. And so hopefully their PBA is taking the right steps to helping us be educated on how to take care of our finances.
Yeah. No, that's great. The PBA does that.
Mhm.
So speaking of kind of maybe some of the differences between, because I mentioned the NBA and then we talked about the PBA, could you talk about what it was like to play basketball back when you were in college? Because in Canada, you went to McGill, it was a really good school for academics, and then you also played on their basketball team. So what was that experience like to play at the college ball level in Canada?
College ball, so it's different. Like you were saying, the NBA. So Canada is different from the NCAA in the US. And I think Canada basketball is more similar to Filipino basketball than to the NCAA in the US, just because we don't have as much height and athleticism as for one thing. Like here, I'm a power forward. In Canada, I played at a power forward. But if I was to go to the US, I would be a small forward or even a shooting guard.
Note to listeners, Sean stands at 6'4". In the NBA, power forwards usually range from 6'7" to 7 feet with shoes on. So for those who use the metric system, Sean is 193 centimeters, and power forwards in the NBA usually range from 201 centimeters to 213 centimeters with their shoes on.
I found it's pretty similar to the transition from Canada to the Philippines, just from a positional perspective. But in terms of skill and pace, it was much different. The Filipino game is a lot fancier, a lot quicker. They're skilled and a lot more like street ball flair to it than it did in Canada. I guess the biggest thing, especially 10 years ago, or was it more than 10 years? Yeah. Playing at McGill, basketball wasn't that big in Canada. Steve Nash was just kind of in his, winning his MVP, so it was growing. I remember he won his first MVP my rookie year, I think. So basketball started to grow after that in Canada with all the grassroots programs Steve Nash put forward. So coming from games of maybe less than 100 people to coming to the PBA where there was games with 15, 20,000 people sometimes, it was like a huge shock just to see like how much Filipinos love basketball. And it was just kind of amazing just to see that.
Yeah. What is the biggest sport in Canada? Would it be hockey?
Hockey for sure.
Yeah. So growing up there, what made you get into basketball? Because I'm sure as someone who was athletic, you dabbled in different sports. How did you decide that this was something you wanted to do at the college level? And then maybe what got you into the sport?
So originally I did play ice hockey. That was one of my first sports. But it becomes a very expensive sport when you're a kid because you have skates, shin pads, elbow pads, chest pad, shoulder gloves, like there's just so much equipment. And as a kid, you're growing so fast, you're going to be spending thousands of dollars every year to switch out your equipment, So basically my mom was like, no, this is way too expensive a sport. You're playing basketball, just one pair of shoes a year, basically. That's all you need. So I switched to basketball, but I played all sports after that. I played basketball, ran track, played rugby. We won a provincial championship with our rugby team. Yeah, I just enjoyed all types of sports.
How old were you when you made the transition into basketball?
I was actually very late. So I played ice hockey and then I stopped. And then I went to a school that didn't have sports. My mom's super religious. So she sent me to this Catholic school that was super small. And basically for all of my elementary school, I didn't have any sports. I just ran club track and played basketball in my backyard a little bit, but nothing in a, an organized sport. It wasn't until high school that I transitioned to a high school that had a lot of sports. And that's when I tried out for the basketball team and made it. And then that's what all my friends were doing. So I just enjoyed it. And then I got much better at it, I guess, and then grew to love it. So it took off from there. But I didn't play basketball till high school.
What was the profile of the athletes that were playing in college?
So usually at the college level, there's so many high schools, right? And then it really narrows down. So maybe one player out of how many teams makes it to a college team, right? If you're lucky and you have a good team, you might have two players from one team make it. So it's much different. So that it's obviously the stars of high school teams that make it to the college level. And of that, it's maybe the best players of certain areas that really make it further into university sports.
Yeah, at what point when you were playing college ball did you think about pursuing this as a professional career after college?
When I was in high school, I always dreamed of trying to make it to the NBA. And back then, no one from Canada was really doing anything in the NBA until Steve Nash when I was in university. But when I was in high school, there wasn't much. So I was really told not to chase that dream. So I kind of just enjoyed it, played it, but I didn't really fully focus on it until when I was in university and I found out that the Philippines had a basketball league. And then I was like, oh, I really want to play pro in the Philippines. And then that's when I started to really pursue it more and like lock in and focus on setting that as a goal to make it to the PBA. Maybe my third year of college.
Okay. How did that affect, I guess, how seriously you took your academics when you were in college?
Unfortunately, in university, I wasn't that into academics. I just wanted to play basketball and kind of have fun. So I would go out a lot and I didn't study business. It wasn't until now, only recently, that I discovered that I enjoyed it. And maybe I should have studied that or taken a passion to it in college. But that's one of what my regrets or something I would advise myself younger was to take my education more seriously. In my head, I was like, oh, I'm going to have fun. And then my third year, I was said, oh, I'm going to just play in the PBA and that's going to be fine. I'm just going to do that. Not really knowing or seeing into the future how short a basketball career is in your whole lifespan. So I wasn't very forward thinking back then. And I unfortunately didn't take my studies as seriously as I should have.
Can you talk about how the recruitment process went? Did you consider other schools before you decided to go play in McGill?
McGill was the only team that offered me a scholarship.
Nice.
It was
No, I
very,
mean, if there were to be a school to offer you a scholarship, like, I guess the listeners are not so familiar. I mean, it gets called the Harvard of Canada, which I guess they don't like, but it's a really good school. So,
yeah, it's called the Harvard of Canada. That's basically the only reason they offered me a scholarship was I had good enough grades to go there. Their problem back then was they couldn't recruit enough players because the standards to get into the school were so high. So I actually, coming out of high school, I didn't have any scholarship offers except from McGill. They're the only one that offered me a scholarship. So made my choice very easy.
yeah, I mean, it's like the universe pointing you down a certain path as well. Sean talked about building a home gym in lockdown to stay in shape. With schools closed right now in many parts of the world, there is also a need for high-quality physical education for kids so that they can stay strong and healthy. Good thing there's Game On Sports PH. Game On Sports PH is the leading multi-sports company in the Philippines that enables kids to discover, learn, and explore sports. Founded by 3 female athletes, they aim to bring quality sports programs to as many kids as possible. Since the pandemic started, they have been providing online physical education programs through their network of professional coaches. Game On Sports PH offers the following classes at the moment. They have multi-sports classes, which are 30-minute classes including basketball, football, rugby, volleyball, and athletics. Their coaches provide a list of equipment needed for every class and alternatives that can easily be found at home. They also offer focused sports classes, which are 45 minutes long, and these allow parents and kids to decide which specific sport they would like to pursue further. They teach fundamental skills matched by drills. Current offerings include basketball, football, boxing, gymnastics, rugby, HIIT, or high-intensity interval training, Muay Thai, Taekwondo, Karate, and volleyball. If you want to ignite your child's potential, help them discover the joy of sports, or build core values, you can contact Game On Sports PH. They are at Game On Sports PH on Instagram, facebook.com/Game On Sports PH, or if you want to check out their latest online class schedule, they have a link tree, linktr.ee/Game On Sports PH. If you're with an educational institution looking to expand your PE program or after-school offerings, definitely give them a call as well. If you believe in empowering the youth through sports, I actually also highly recommend checking out their partner organization, Girls Got Game, which is a nonprofit that empowers young women from underprivileged communities through sports. Girls Got Game has pivoted from sports camps to e-learning during this pandemic as well, including partnering with a leading athletics brand to distribute Wi-Fi and sports gear to partner communities as well. Check them out. They're at Girls Got Game PH on Instagram or facebook.com/Girls Got Game PH. Now back to Sean, who shares his perspective on how he would coach one of his kids to be a professional athlete. I heard a story about when you were starting in the PBA, you were thinking of also kind of studying at the same time or doing a business venture, I think. I don't know if I have it right. But I think you, at that point, decided to focus on the sport, knowing that, there is a time frame at which to seize that moment.
So I think what you're referring to was, for the listeners, we're actually close family friends as well. So Joanne's dad has given me a lot of advice and we would talk. So earlier on in my career, much earlier, maybe my third or fourth year, I actually attended Ateneo University in the entrepreneurship program. So I enrolled, was accepted, and was a student. But they require us to attend minimum 75% of the classes. And it just conflicted too much with basketball that I couldn't make that mark. If I had to choose between going to class or going to a game or going to class and going to practice, it always had to be basketball because that was my career at the time. So I ended up having to drop out of the program due to not being able to physically be in class, which was unfortunate because I was able to study enough and get all the material so I could learn, but I wasn't able to finish and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's what you might be referring to.
Your mom had mentioned, I think we were at a dinner once, and then she mentioned that I think you'd asked her advice also, and she was actually quite supportive, saying, you know what, you can go study later, but you're kind of in your prime for playing, and go pursue that if you have to. So I thought that was really nice, actually, because being a professional athlete is not a super common path for some families, and not all parents are so encouraging. So that story always stuck out to me, just hearing her talk about how should encourage you to go for it. I mean, I don't know if there were other conversations also, but like in the version of the story I heard it, she sounded extremely supportive.
In that instance, she was, but as you're saying, up until that point, she had never said that. Let's put it like that. So my whole high school and university, she was like, stop focusing on basketball, focus on your studies, nonstop. She's like, pro basketball, don't worry about it. But then once I got into the league, she really supported it. And she was like, why are you studying? Like, you need to be working on your jump shot, or like you need to be doing this, worry about that later, establish yourself. Once I was, I guess, into the league and in that front door, then she saw, I guess, how it was. And then she really pushed me to be the best and whatnot that I could be. But I think she's always just concerned, right? And the amount of people that try to play professional sports and fail is a lot more, right? So I think she was just a concerned mom in high school and university, and was not really telling me not to pursue my dream, but just put school first at that time because she didn't think I would make it, maybe. I don't know. But then once I made it, she was like, don't worry about studying now. Focus on basketball and establish yourself there first, and then worry about your education again later. or just like study it, but not in an institution like Ateneo.
Yeah, and now the pandemic's actually provided an opportunity for you to kind of do both, which is I find interesting because the whole nature of education and whether you need to be in the classroom is changed. And I think it'll be interesting to see that dynamic down the line if other players who are in your shoes will have to make that trade-off moving forward, at least for the next few years. What was the best advice you ever got at any point in your career that you would want to pass on to other athletes who might be in your shoes?
I think there was a point in my career that I was really struggling and I was really frustrated all the time. And working with this like psychology, like a mental coach, basically, it basically came down to me being scared of failing because I guess growing up, I felt like everyone told me I wouldn't be good enough to play pro. So when I would fail, I'd be like, in my head, I'd be like, oh, like they're right or like whatnot. So it was basically about working down to the root problem and just being able to tell myself, like, no matter what, like, I'm okay. Like, you know, I have my family, I have this, like, I'm always going to be okay. So what's there me to be scared of? Let me just go out there and be bold, right? So it's that don't let fear or fear of failure like stop you from actually trying to do something. So be bold and go out there and play with that confidence, you know? But yeah, it's like, it was really having to work back to the root problem to find it, because you can always tell someone to go out and play confidence, but when things start going bad and you don't know what's really drawing you down, that's the problem. So yeah, it was about knowing that you're good enough. I'm not saying good like in terms of skill, but I'm just happy with who I am, you know, like I'm me, it's fine. So don't worry about missing a shot, losing a game or whatnot. Just go out there and no matter what happens on the court, you're fine. So go out and play with confidence.
Yeah, wow. What percent of the game would you say is mental versus physical? I mean, I don't even know if you can quantify it, but a lot of people talk about how the mental preparation and conditioning is also extremely important.
Well, I mean, the physical conditioning is what's needed, like first and foremost, right? You have to be able to hold your own. But then what separates just the normal, like people at the physical is the mental, right? Like that can just take you, it's like I guess to think about the mental game as a multiplier effect, right? If you have the physical stature or the skills or whatnot, if you have the mental ability, I feel it takes that much further, like an amplifier effect.
Do you have a meditation practice? Because I know you've done yoga, right? Because of your wife, but is meditation something you also practice to condition the mind?
I do use meditation to calm the mind, to focus. Sometimes I'll use mantras if I'm trying to work on something through the week, you know, just to build it or to ingrain that into me. But just for that, like it just clear my thoughts or to settle me down, especially now with the pandemic going on, where there's just kind of like this subconscious stress that builds up, you know, like not knowing what's going on, not knowing the changing environment. Like, for example, are we going to be practicing in the next week or not? Is it going to be GCQ or ECQ? You know, like little things like that, and not being able to know, like there's so much going on. Like it's kind of like I use it just to settle my mind and just be like, okay, what can I control? How am I in the present? And what can I do? I use it like that.
Yeah, that's really healthy. I guess, knowing what you know now, I had asked earlier what was the best advice you received and that you would want to pass on to other people. If one of your kids told you that they wanted to play, how would you, I guess, what would you do that was similar to your upbringing? And then what would you do differently?
Good question. For me, first and foremost, I would never push my kid unless he loved the sport. It has to come from the kid himself. You know, I can't just look at my son and be like, okay, you're going to be a great basketball player, so I'm putting a ball in your hand and I'm going to make you work every day over and over and drill this in you until you're the best. Because if he doesn't love it or is passionate about it, he's never going to be able to take it onto his own and pursue it, right? So for me, it's exposing them to just a wide variety of things and finding out what they're passionate about it, and then growing from there, whatever it is. Just like my mom, I would make sure that no matter what it is, they have education and something to fall back on. But I would look to nurture that and really support it. And yeah.
Yeah. And then what would you do that would be a bit different from how you were raised?
Bit different.
If they wanted to play, like how would you, I guess this is kind of advice also for parents who might have kids that are interested in the sport or interested in being a professional athlete. What can a parent do to further encourage that?
If my son came up to me and was like, "Dad, I want to be,"
I want to do what you do one day.
yeah, exactly. Then I think I would sit down with him and come up with a legitimate plan on how to do that. I would go over everything about him, right? Let's say he's a teenager. Okay, how tall are you? What attributes do you have? Okay, so you're taller, you're faster. Okay, like let's work on these skills and build your game so you can be like this player in a realistic player and whatnot, rather than just doing everything. Like, okay, like I kind of felt like that's how I advanced, was like I looked at how I could be 10 years down the line and I just try to add those skills every year, you know? So that's kind of what I would do with my son as well. And then I'd be like, okay, how do we structure your diet? How do we structure your workouts? How do we structure so you get to that point or whatnot? I didn't really have that streamline effect growing up. Like I kind of was just going through the motions, just like, oh, I always got to be working hard, but it wasn't really smart and tailored to the direction that I wanted to go in. Like I didn't have that foresight and that vision. It was just like, oh, I'm going to go in the gym and shoot 1,000 shots every day, but I was shooting with the wrong form. I was shooting over too long of a period. So some of the shots were game pace, others were just like me throwing it up, stuff like that. Like I kept saying like, oh, I'm a super hard worker, but I wasn't working smart. It's about maximizing the both of those.
Yeah. Sean, what would you say is your favorite part of what you do?
My favorite part?
Hmm.
I love it all. Like I just love the game, but specifically, I think I just love the competition. I'm very competitive. You can ask my mom or all my siblings, no matter what we're doing, for playing charades or Scrabble, Monopoly. Like I'm always locked in and I'm trying to win. So I just love that competition that basketball gives, and I think that's what I'm going to miss, or that's what I'm missing the most, and that's what I'm going to miss the most when I'm done. Like right now, my wife even jokes sometimes because like I'll be doing stuff in the house. She's like, "Yeah, the PBA needs to start up, so you stop like competing with me or like trying to win this or that at home, or like just I don't know." So one of the things I actually took up during the pandemic, because we're not able to play basketball, was golf. So I started to get really serious and just trying to beat my last score or my friends, and just working on all the little different things. So yeah.
Yeah. Are they complementary sports? Because I know that there are some sports that you're not supposed to play together, and that there's some that go well together. For instance, like badminton and fencing, but not like fencing and tennis. So what sports are complementary to basketball? Because golf is a different form, right? The physicality of it's different.
Instead of physicality, but I think it goes well from the other side, the mental side. There's a lot more technical stuff that can go wrong in golf, right? When you're shooting, it's basically like elbow in, keeps it straight, and then it's basically finding the touch. In golf, you're shifting weight, you're rotating, you got club face, ball, and then like angles. So there's just so many more things and variables. So it's like, how do you take that and then just figure it out and just kind of make it subconscious and just play in the zone, kind of, right? So I mean, you look, Michael Jordan played golf, Steph Curry played golf. It didn't change any of the games, but I think it's just a good way to stay competitive, a good way to work on your mental ability, because to hit a perfect golf shot every time is like impossible. You see even the pros, right? Like one of the quotes is, it's not how good your good is, it's how bad your bad is. I think Tiger said that, right? So it's like, how do you adjust? So I think that's what a lot of players and myself personally like too, is being able to keep mentally sharp through golf.
Yeah, and it's kind of you've built in social distancing, so moving forward.
Exactly. You're out,
Yeah.
and you're outside,
Yep.
so you're breathing fresh air, which
Mm-hmm.
you don't always get. So that was the main thing at first, actually.
Nice. Okay, so on the flip side, Sean, what are parts of what you do that you don't enjoy so much, that are very challenging, or that somebody who is not so serious about this career would, from the outside looking in, would look at as maybe a deal breaker?
Um, I mean, I love what I do and everything, but there's always like little sacrifices we have to make, right? So one thing is we don't really control our schedule, right? So I've never been able to plan a family vacation the whole time I've been playing basketball. Not that I haven't taken them, but it's kind of like you're playing, you got eliminated, and then it's like, okay, honey, like we got to book a ticket tonight to go because we only got the next week and a half off, you know? So I've been trying to get together with my siblings for a long time and plan like a trip with my siblings. But unfortunately, I can never give them a date. It's like, okay, the playoffs are the whole month of March. So maybe the first week of March or the last week of March. Like I can't even tell you, but I'll just give you guys a heads up the day before I can go.
Wow.
That's one of the harder things is we don't get that. Yeah, plan a vacation. We obviously get vacation time and can take vacations. It's just we can't ever plan ahead. So
Mm,
let's say like plan something with my siblings
yeah. Have you ever had to miss special occasions of your family?
all the time. The first week I was in the bubble, I missed my grandparents' 90th birthday and my son's first birthday. We miss stuff all the time. And then in college, they always have Christmas tournaments. So my family would get together here in the Philippines, and I would be in Las Vegas or Hawaii playing in a basketball tournament almost every Christmas.
Almost like a different kind of bubble. Like you're separate from everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the name of the pod is Occupational Hazards. So you've talked about some of the ups and then some of the hazards, but if you had to fill in this blank, don't pursue this profession if you blank, what would you put in that blank?
Wow. It's hard because I think almost everybody would enjoy playing basketball, right? Don't join this profession if I guess if you're not really willing to dedicate the unseen hours to it. I think a lot of people don't see the extra work that all the athletes put in. They just see them come out on whatever game day and play, but they don't see the little details that a lot of the players take the time to do.
Yeah. I saw this joke in I think it was Mad Magazine where they were talking about the difference between sports and real life. And they said, in the real world, when you like fail a subject or you like wipe out, they don't then display your failing grades on a scoreboard for like thousands of people to see and then replay that wipeout like 10 times. So it's something to do with like the ego, I guess, and the maybe the trappings of celebrity. Do you think that that is also one of the downsides of the job? Maybe the negative press or like the fans and detractors, like all these comments, with social media now.
There's always some difficulties. People like to kick you when you're down, you know. And another saying says you just got to flip it that if no one's talking poorly about you, you're not really doing anything, right? So it's like you're actually doing something, right? People will always talk negative, right? So if you're actually doing something and you're moving forward, that the negative comments, it's almost, I find it reassuring. It's like, oh, okay, like at least I'm doing something that, you know,
People are watching
yeah,
and they care enough to write
yeah,
something, right? Or make a
exactly.
comment. Yeah, that's a super healthy outlook. There was a question actually, because we're talking about audience, feedback.
Mhm.
There was a question from the audience about, do you think that there can even be a greatest of all time? Because players get compared all the time. But this person made the comment that, the style of play changes per era, and maybe even the rules and the conditions. Like people like to pit players against each other. But yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of ranking of players and how subjective that is? Or even the players you look up to. It might be for different reasons, but people kind of debate, like, who's better, like Michael Jordan, or was it LeBron, or was it Kobe? Like, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, like there's some players that are better than others, but once you're comparing those guys, they're all so good that it's hard. It is different eras. It's all different. It's different systems and opportunity, right? Like a different player in a different team or whatever, a different circumstance could have changed the player's career totally. It's hard to compare, but if you're in the same era, then it's a little easier, right? So in the 80s and 90s, Jordan was there, right? That was Jordan's time. And then now it's like this era, LeBron's been the most dominant. Before LeBron was Kobe. Like you can kind of see, because you can literally compare like who's winning championships at that time, who's more dominant when they match up, you know. But if you're going from like who's better, LeBron or Michael Jordan, then that becomes much tougher, you know. I have my own opinions with that, but yeah, to say greatest of all time is tough when it goes across generations, because you can even look back at players like Will Chamberlain that were scoring like 100 points in a game and was averaging ridiculous things that could never be done again.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just different eras, right? Like,
Yeah. So aside from natural athleticism,
Mhm.
like just they're able to shoot the ball, what separates, I guess, the good from the great? That's another way of asking the question.
I'm starting to see that leadership, I think. Like you look at the great players we were just talking about, right? They were able to challenge and build unity on their teams to bring everybody to a higher level. So it's not about just being individually a good player. What makes them great is being a leader, bring everyone else up. Another skill would be the mental toughness that we talked about earlier, being able to do things when things aren't going well, or being able to just deal with tough circumstances and, you know, be confident and all that.
There was another question from the audience before we kind of wrap this up and go to the lightning round.
Mm-hmm.
Listener Justin is asking, why are the players that represent the Philippine team, well, he said so old, but I think what he means is older than those in the other leagues at the international level, like the teams that we send to compete internationally. And then follow-up question, is there any way to get younger players into the league and into those international competitions sooner?
Well, I think that's what we're doing now. I think the national team at the moment is the Gilas cadets or whatnot. So it's all the college players right now that are about to go pro. They're the ones in the bubble getting ready for the Olympic qualifiers or something like that. The tournament in Clark coming up. There's no one from the PBA there, so it's all the younger guys.
What made the difference? Like historically, was that the case? It seems like not, right?
No, I think they just go with who's the best at the time. And I think in those situations, the guys at their prime are older, right? But I guess what he might be referring to is how to have younger players kind of like grow with that, like incorporating maybe both. So you have veterans and youth.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he's asking in that question, but I think lately the Gilas program has been just trying to put together the best team, and the PBA has been lending all the players that they can. But I think they changed it this year now, if I'm not mistaken, where it's all the younger kids, and there's no PBA players going into the FIBA window.
You're right, though. You do need a balance of experience, and it's not. I don't think age is the thing that determines whether you win or not, or if you're a good player or not. But I think he was just curious, as maybe comparing the ages historically of
Maybe what
like our
maybe
teams.
what he wants is more continuity, maybe like a blend. So there's always guys with national team experience. I'm not sure.
Yeah, perhaps. Okay, so moving to the kind of more fun round, I think you gave us a very clear picture of what the life of an athlete is like, and also the rigor that goes into training, which we didn't even really talk so much about that. But for those who follow you on Instagram, they see the grind that goes into it, and you don't really sugarcoat any of it. Your work, you're very serious about your workouts. I mean, we'll put some links in the show notes to where people can follow you on the socials, so they can get a continuation of this peek into the life of an athlete that we've started discussing here. So, a couple quick questions. Just what inspires you?
What inspires me?
Mhm.
My family. Basically, whatever I do now is for them. I mean, basketball, I love what I do and stuff, but ultimately, I want to make sure my family's provided for. People who inspire me are guys like Kobe. I just like what he did on the court and then how he was able to transition into, like, he opened up a venture capital fund in his last year. He started Body Armor, the drink, and he took that and sold it. So his transition into the business world was really cool. My grandfather, I think, is probably my biggest inspiration. He was a super successful businessman here, and then he gave it all up just to help all the Filipinos. So he has his foundation and he just gives back. Yeah, he inspires me a lot too.
What about proudest achievement?
Proudest achievement? I guess family again. My kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows that you value what's really important. Ideal player that you'd want to go up against, dead or alive?
Kobe. I just like this. Everyone talks about how fierce and ferocious a competitor he is, his mentality, all that kind of stuff. I just kind of would like to see that, I think, and just compete, go up against that.
Were you here when he visited the Philippines? He played a couple games.
I was here. I wasn't one of the guys. That was my rookie year, so unfortunately, I wasn't at the level where I was selected to play in that game. But
were you watching the games, or was there like a sched conflict that night?
There. I don't think I was in town at that time, but
Okay.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah. Any favorite, I guess, games that you look back on and you're extremely proud of your performance?
I like the triple overtime game we had last year to upset the number 1 seed. I think that was the game of the year last year. It won the award. Yeah, that was a fun game, the triple overtime game, to beat the number 1 seed and twice to beat advantage, and then hitting the game winner as well. So
yeah. We'll try to look for like a highlight reel and put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite movies about the sport that you think either that are entertaining or that capture what it's like to be an athlete?
There's so many great documentaries out now that go behind the scenes. Like they just had the whole Last Dance series for Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. Kobe was into making documentaries before he passed, right? And he made some great ones about him coming back from his Achilles injury and whatnot. So there's tons of great documentaries on players and behind the scenes on how they got to where they are.
Yeah. What would you want your legacy to be, or how would you like to be remembered?
In basketball or in general?
Could be both.
In basketball, I would like to be known as a fierce competitor, a leader, and ultimately a winner. So I'd like to get a championship before I retire. But yeah, I want to be able to make everyone else around me better and just be a positive influence on all of that. And in terms of my life, I think I want to be able to help my children and my family grow and go out into the world and to do stuff that contributes to a better society. And I hope I can lead them by example. And once I finish basketball or not, like venture out and create companies or whatnot that contribute to employees' well-beings and it contributes to, just a better community as well.
Yeah. Who would be your vote to play in a movie about your life?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe one of my rookies that are on the team right now. Maybe the other Sean McConkey. Just tell him.
Yeah, it's very rare when they're making sports movies that you get somebody who can both act and play basketball. I think in Love and Basketball, which is the hashtag, it is a movie, also the hashtag of your wedding. I think the girl that they cast, they really liked her acting, and then when they started training, they were like, "Oh no, you're gonna need."
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, just the kids in the Mighty Ducks. Also, I think they all lied about being able to play hockey. It's like a thing. Yeah, for sports movies, they typically have to go through this intensive kind of training because I think the studios are used to it, but yeah, it's smart for you to pick someone who's an athlete.
Well, yeah, my wife did some acting, right? So some of her friends were joking. One of her friends, Dante Basco, he played Rufio in Hook.
Yeah.
So his joke was when we were hanging out, he was like, no matter what they tell you, say you can do it and then just learn it. And he was telling me that he had to do a scene where he had to know how to roller skate. And so he was like, yeah, I can roller skate. I can go backwards, sideways, whatever. So they gave him the part, and he went, and then he just, boom, ate it on the first take. And then he was like, oh man, I really got to learn how to roller skate.
Yeah, but he already had the job at that point. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Any hidden talents or untapped potential?
I think I have a lot of untapped potential. I just only recently started to discover life outside of basketball. So, I hope to build a lot of stuff after basketball. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. And it's almost exciting for me to venture out after basketball into new opportunities and ventures.
Yeah, you're so lucky of the opportunity and I think, capacity to do both. Not a lot of people, I think, are able to balance it the way you do. So I look forward to seeing what's your next chapter as well. Speaking of next chapters, how can people find you online or keep track of what you're doing next?
I have all my social media stuff. So it's Sean Anthony 10, Instagram, Twitter. I think that's only 2 I have. But yeah, they can follow me on there. And hopefully I do things with enough significance that you'll hear about it after basketball.
Yeah. How did you choose your jersey number, by the way?
10?
Yeah.
I had a whole bunch of numbers. So when I was young, my favorite player was Kevin Garnett for a while. So I started off with number 21. Then when I got to the PBA, someone had it. So I couldn't take it. So I went through the numbers and I was just trying to figure out. And then I just liked the number 10 because I was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good was your day? Or, like on a scale of 1 to 10. So in my head, I was like, I should push for perfect 10 days all the time or perfect 10 workouts or whatnot, So like in my head, number 10 is that perfect number. So it reminds me to always strive for that whenever I'm in a workout or a game or whatnot.
Nice. And that was also the year you started, right? So you can always mark your anniversary.
2010. Yeah, you're right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sean, thank you so much for spending time talking to us about your journey thus far. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this new rollout of what did you call it? The closed circuit. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that rolls out. I think, I guess there have been a lot of questions about what is essential, what is not essential, but a lot of the sports fans are absolutely given hope by what you do. So I think it'll be a good way to lift people's spirits and give them something to focus on also.
I hope we're successful and we can play, and we're definitely looking forward to getting back on the court, hopefully, and hopefully next month we'll be able to give everyone some entertainment to try and, brighten up everyone's homes.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Good night. Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, and share with a friend so that others can find the pod as well. Do check out @occupationalhazards.podcast on Instagram, where we have more updates from our guests and some listener feedback. Slide into our DMs. We'd love to hear from you. Catch you next episode.